So we now welcome in Nicky Bandini. Nicky, my question for you while we are talking about Inter is this the season where they'll truly be judged? Because surely after what they achieved last season, the pressure's now on.
I mean, I'd probably argue that Inter are already judged. They're always judged. That's probably exactly what Conte would rail about, is how much he felt judged in that first season when he thought it wasn't fair. I suppose it depends what parameter you're setting for them. If you're asking me, do I think we should be judging Inter by the yardstick of they have to win the league this season, which I think some people might go for. I mean, I certainly think that when you look at Conte's cycles, when you look at sort of how briefly he's tended to stay with teams and how quickly he's tended to achieve success, even among Inter fans, there's some feeling that, yes, there's a pressure to get on and win something while Conte is still fresh before this does come apart. Do I think it's reasonable necessarily to say you have to win the league this season? I mean, look, you're still coming after a juggernaut. You're still going to try and topple a Juventus team that has spent more money than you, that is richer than you, that has 9 consecutive Serie A titles behind it. I think there are reasons to think this title race could be really, really fun. And I think that Inter can win it. But I'm still a little bit hesitant to say, yes, we should expect Inter to win because it's asking a lot.
Yeah, it became a bit exhausting, didn't it, last season? All the complaints, all the whining from Conte. He was complaining that they didn't have as much time to train compared to other teams after lockdown. It was always something. And the thing that I still can't wrap my head around is complaining about the upper management, which maybe he has some gripes behind the scenes. But in terms of personnel, not going for Sandro Tonali and getting Arturo Vidal for the now. Last season, getting Romelu Lukaku, who Conte desperately wanted when he was the manager of Chelsea and couldn't get, and all the money that Inter spent for Lukaku, which, by the way, now looks like a very good fee, right? Because Lukaku, I think, was just on the verge of superstardom with what we saw from him, his production in Serie A, the way that he looked unstoppable as this physical force who felt beloved by his coach, obviously by the fan base. I think this next season, Inter fans will probably think it differently, that they need to be the anti-Juve. They need to eclipse Juventus finally after this 9 years of a Juventus Scudetto run. But a further run into the Champions League, I think, is where Inter really need to be at. This isn't a team that was built for Europa League. This is a team that, with the Chinese ownership, with the money that they're spending, is built to go further in the Champions League than what they've been able to do last season. I think it's a slightly better squad. The addition of Achraf Hakimi finally gives them a very good wing back, which has been their weakness last season. The partnership between Lautaro, who seems to be staying, and Romelu Lukaku is only going to get better. And it's the best midfield unit in all of Italy, with the two of the best young Italian midfielders in Sensi and Nicolo Barella. The defense is very good. The team really doesn't have much of a weakness now. And I just wonder, with the midweek rounds and, only a few days to prepare in between, that's not where Conte is at his best. Mm-hmm. When he has to make rotations, when he has to make substitutions, I think that's where he was lacking a bit last season. If he has a full week to prepare, Conte is great. But once you get those midweek rounds and you start hearing the complaints and maybe there isn't as much turnover as you'd like, I think that's where it gets tricky, especially in the latter half of the season. Conte really grinds the team. He expects so much work rate from them behind the scenes, and they tend to tire out in the second half of the campaign.
Yeah, I think there's one really sort of important sort of transition that you've made there that I should come back to, which is just when Kay asked me the question, actually, what Kay asked me was, is this season to judge Inter? And I jumped straight on Conte, because we always talk about Conte. If you want to talk about individuals, you've already mentioned it, but Romelu Lukaku, you could judge him for last season and say he was brilliant. Like, he was possibly the individually most influential player, I think, in all of Serie A. I think that going way beyond his goals, what he gave that team last season in terms of work rate, in terms of personality, in those moments when they needed someone to stand up and drag them forward, it was Lukaku over and over again. So, there are judgments you make constantly with these teams all the time. I think it's going to be a very revealing season for Inter, certainly, because, if you want my opinion, and it's only an opinion, I think that if Conte doesn't win the league this season, we won't see Conte there, possibly even by the end of the season, but certainly not next season.
So is it now or never for the Scudetto with Conte and Inter, Nicky?
I think so. I think it is for Conte. I think, if you look at how we got to the end of this season, with, even after the Europa League win, pretty much consensus among people quite close to Conte that he wasn't going to be back. It was kind of a surprise when a few days later they go and have this big sort of head-to-head with him and the directors, and he's already spoken to Stephen Chang, and 45 minutes later he comes out and says, yes, we're going to press ahead. Even as they went into that room together, you had his Inter obituary, if you will, being written by lots of people in Milan. Like, it was sort of ready to go, these pieces of, and now what's next? And it didn't happen. So look, I'm already nervous to sort of find out what he's going to say about the fact that almost certainly Vidal isn't going to be there by this weekend. I mean, Inter have a bit more time before their first game, but still, like, this sort of building sort of time bomb of these things that are supposed to happen that haven't happened yet. I don't know, like, I've been watching Conte long enough to believe that the sort of the next sort of outburst, or I don't know, can't think of a polite way to put it, but the next frustration is probably a better way to put it, is not far away. And I think that he genuinely holds too tight to winning. Like, it matters too much to him that if they don't do it this season, I just don't think he'll be able to sort of handle the tension of it anymore.
What you're saying, Nicky, is that we're not going to see a happy Conte. We are still going to see him moaning throughout the rounds.
Well, you never know. Maybe they'll be winning every game for the first 20 matches, and then maybe he'll crack a smile at some point. I mean,
and that's a good point about the winning now, because you could see from the transfer market, and actually want to go back a few years and to think that they gave away Nicolo Zaniolo basically for free. Nainggolan didn't do anything at Inter. They gave away Davide Santon, and actually money as well. And to think that they could have had Nicolo Zaniolo, they could have had Sandro Tonali. These are players, obviously, for the future. And for Conte, as you said, it's all about winning, and winning right now. He doesn't care about the long-term project at Inter. He doesn't care about Sandro Tonali, who's going to come in and who's still a player that's 20 years old. He just turned 20 this season, who still needs to add some things. It wasn't a perfect season for him at Brescia last campaign. And he's obviously a player that's going to take a few years to see how great he can get. I think he can become very good. I think we saw characteristics of Tonali that would suggest that he is going to be one of the most important midfielders in Serie A. Conte doesn't care. Conte wants to win now. That's why he's getting a Vidal that's on the tail end of his prime. And it's all about what happens this season. He was, as you said, Nicky, on the verge of leaving just a few weeks ago. He's not looking past next season. Is this the best thing for Inter long term? Absolutely not. Spending big money on players that are not going to be there in 2 to 3 years.
Well, so I might disagree with you a tiny bit there, only because what Inter are doing right now, which is important and which needed to happen, is after quite a fallow period, they are rebuilding the brand. Like, Inter are coming back in an international sense, trying to sort of reestablish themselves as a genuine rival to Juventus. And I think it's okay for there to be some short-termism within that project, because if you do win the league, that's the single best thing you can do for your club's profile. That's the single best thing you can do for it.
I understand, but I'm just wondering, is Vidal really someone that you put in the lineup and you're like, he's head and shoulders above who they already had? Brozovic, maybe some immaturity behind the scenes.
Maybe,
but
who you had and sent off to Cagliari last season. I mean, I agree with that. Yeah,
exactly. And then Sensi, Barella, we didn't see nearly the best of Christian Eriksen, but their midfield was already, in my opinion, the best midfield unit, even with the depth that they had that they could bring off the bench. This team in the midfield was better than Juventus. They had a lot more creativity. They have players that are already young and who are playing excellent football if they're not injured, like Sensi. So you're bringing in a Vidal who didn't even start every game for Barcelona, and he is on the decline. And that's where I'm like, right, if you're bringing in someone who's in the prime of their career, who costs a ton of money, who's in their late 20s, perhaps then I get it. You put him in the lineup, and Inter are noticeably better. Are Inter noticeably better, though, with Vidal on the pitch when you remove one of the 3 normal central midfielders that they would have if everyone's healthy? That's my big question.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you on that. I'm talking the strategy rather than the specifics, like the Vidal signing, the obsession that Conte has with some players that he's had before and that he thinks is going to work. That's, I mean, that's Conte all over. But
that's a nostalgia signing, most definitely.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.